Alright, it's time for another update and forecast on the park fire. We're especially going to be looking at that northeastern section of the fire that has been the most active recently, and as was expected, it has certainly picked up in activity this afternoon. This is a time lapse showing the last 3 hours where we started off the day exceptionally dry. We didn't have a good relative humidity recovery last night, so the moisture didn't go back into the fuels overnight. So we started off the day with fairly active behavior, and then we were able to punch through that inversion throughout the afternoon where you could see those big pyrocumulus clouds. Now, I will say towards the end of this loop, it looks like it's starting to lie down a little bit. It's hard to say that when you're still seeing that much activity on the fire, but it looks like it's already less active than it was about an hour and a half ago. So hopefully that means we're moving in the right direction, but I'm sure we'll continue to see things change throughout the course of this video, and we'll just try to monitor the situation and see exactly what's happening. So the best way to figure out what's happening is to first figure out where we are and where the fire is the most active. So here's the park fire perimeter. We have Chico down to the south, Red Bluff to the west, Paradise to the southeast, Manton and Shingletown up towards the north. Probably the last time I'm going to say any of those communities because you guys are basically all in the clear right now. It's really just this northeastern section of the fire that's the most active. So my main concerns here are Mineral and Mill Creek. Now just right here, this is actually maybe the first thing that I should show because it's a change from the update that I had about 5 hours ago. What we thought was a spot fire this morning was actually a firing operation. I actually should have been able to tell that it was a firing operation just because it was right along a ridge and right along a road right here. You see 172. But since then, they've actually extended it. And I'm not sure how recent this fire perimeter data is, but it looks like they have a firing operation that would hopefully form what I believe they call a catcher's mitt around this entire northeastern side. And then on this western side, where it looks like there's a big opening right there, they've just been blasting that side of the fire with air attack. Actually, they've been doing basically both sides of this finger extending up towards Mineral and Mill Creek with air attack. Looks like that tanker just dropped some retardant right there. See 1, 2, 3 helicopters, number of planes all in this exact same area. So looks like what their plan is right here is they did the firing operations. What that means is they burned out the fuels when the conditions were more favorable, and they did it right along 172. And then you clear out some of those fuels, so then if the fire does get to that point, then there's no more fuels for it to burn, and then it just kind of stops in its tracks. And what I was saying about, I don't know how recent the fire perimeter data is. See this big opening right there, right around Mill Creek? I'm not sure if they've been able to connect those two dots, but I'd imagine that was the goal right here. So that whole strip right there is going to be where they've purposely cleared out fuels. And then their kind of objective would be to just keep it within that firing operation as it continues to move up right here. Basically what they want is for it to fill this pocket right here and then have that be it. And then have it bump into the north side of the firing operation, the east side, basically have no more fuels to keep going. And then on this west side, if they haven't been able to complete it down here, which most recent fire perimeter data shows that it just extends right there, then I believe their plan is just to blast that side of the fire with air attack and just keep it locked up right there. So that kind of gives us a first glance at the situation. Clearly, though, air attack just swarming the fire, especially that left side right there. But we can get some idea of what's been going on just looking at Watch Duty. If you don't know this website, I'd strongly recommend it. It's one of the best places to get some updates. And then we're going to go into what kind of weather we have and try to see if things are actually improving on the fire. Now, right here, it looks like current view of the fire from Highway 172 just south of Mineral from Watch Duty reporter Michael Steinberg. He's a great photographer. Definitely follow him on X if you haven't already. Still feels weird not to call it Twitter. But that's a shot right there. And then an hour ago, said Air Attack has requested 3 very large air tankers and 3 Type 1 tankers to start a retardant operation on the left flank of the fire, from the Highway 172 area south and west to the Turner Mountain area. So, looks like that plan is now in effect. That was about an hour ago, and if we look at the left flank right now, the left flank basically means like the left side of where that finger is extending. You can actually see one of those very large air tankers about to drop some retardant, like as I'm speaking right there. What's pretty amazing about the technology that we have to use. And apologies as well if I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. Again, I've been doing kind of nonstop coverage, plus I'm also a broadcast meteorologist, so I'm also waking up early in the morning and forecasting for the Central Coast in between wildfire videos. So try to push through, and maybe I'll try to make this one a bit more concise just to save my voice for tomorrow, because we most likely will have some active behavior tomorrow as well. So right there, this one's going to tie into a video that we're about to see. Radio traffic indicates the fire is spotted across Highway 172 and a couple of spots near Mineral Summit, but nothing major at this time. So when I first read that, that seems like terrible news. It's spotting across 172. That's where they did the firing operation. So that was one fear that I had about this firing operation, is like what we saw in the Dixie fire. They cleared out all the fuels north of the fire, and then we had some burning embers jump over the firing operation and then just take off. So spotting is what I'm afraid of, for it to be able to go past this firing operation. One thing working for us is the winds aren't that strong today. I mean, if we just look at some of the stations on the ground, Mill Creek right now is showing a 4-mile-per-hour wind. That's close to nothing. South of there, maybe closer to where the fire is, 7-mile-per-hour wind. So that's where the weather forecast has been working in our favor. Interestingly, look at the temperature of Mill Creek. It's only 70 degrees right now. That's because it's shaded by smoke, whereas if you go just over to the west to Mineral, where there's not as much shading, it's showing 93 degrees, and then west of there, 94, 95. So right there, directly under the plume, you can see how we weren't able to warm up as much, although it does look like we got up to 85 earlier this afternoon. Key thing that I noticed, though, and the key thing that's driving our fire behavior, since you might be thinking, okay, if it wasn't that windy, how come the fire is so active? Min relative humidity right there, 13%. Anytime you see it in the teens, you're going to have very active behavior. And there were some spots this morning that were already at only around 8%. So 11% right there. So that's why we've had such an active day. It's because we're very dry, and then there's also a lot of fuel in this area. So just looking here, we could turn on fire history. We got the Ponderosa fire to the northwest, kind of protecting Manton and Shingletown, little barrier where the fuels have been cleared out. We got the Dixie fire to the east, which is going to be protecting areas around Lake Almanor. But then directly where this fire is the most active right now, So I paused right there because I was looking at these new heat detections. I'll comment on that in 1 second, but just want to finish that thought. No fire history where this fire is the most active as of right now. So that's two things that are driving a lot of the growth at the moment. It's how dry it is, relative humidity in the single digits to teens, and then also abundant fuels that haven't burned in decades and have also been drying out a lot over the last month and a half with how hot we've been. So where I lost my train of thought there for a second is because this map just updated a little bit, and it is showing some heat kind of escaping out of where we were hoping it would be. So what we were hoping is that it would fill in to where they did the firing operations, and then it would just stop right there, and then they would blast this left side with enough air attack that it would kind of just keep it in there. But just based on that imagery, it looks like the fire has kind of poked through that little hole in the firing operation and where the previous fire perimeter was. So just based on that, that would be some, I hate to say this, but that would be some bad news for mineral, because when we look at the winds, it could then take some of that heat and then go right around the firing operation that we had right there. Now, since that was bad news that I just said, I do just want to go back here where it says, spotted across Highway 172 in a couple spots near Mineral Summit, but nothing major at this time. So until I see another update that says there is something major at this time, then I think we're just going to continue to go off of that. Because as we've seen in the past, and we certainly saw yesterday, these heat detection maps aren't always very accurate. So it's the best information that we have to work with, but we sometimes take those with a grain of salt. The fire perimeter data is going to be the most accurate information that we have to go off of. So something that I mentioned there, it says Highway 172, and then it also says in a couple spots near Mineral Summit. So let's try to figure out where it's talking about. Highway 172 goes right along that firing operation. So if it's saying spots over that, it would mean it's kind of jumping over the firing operation, which is not what we want to hear. But again, they said nothing major at this time. And then Mineral Summit, I believe, no, it doesn't label it on this map. So let's try to check out another map. So here's Mineral. Here's Mineral Summit. And then that white line you see right there, I believe is 172. It's not labeled on this map. You always have to piece together like 8 different maps to try to figure out what's going on. Another way we could look at it is Google Earth, where I don't have the most recent perimeter data. This is why we thought it was a spot fire this morning. I should have known just because of how far away that is from the main perimeter. And I also should have known because it's right on a ridge along a road. But this right here is Mineral Summit. And then here is Mineral. So that's kind of the main area that we're worried about right now. I think the one thing that works in our favor is that it looks like it's downhill as you go from Mineral Summit to Mineral. And fire doesn't move as quickly downhill as it moves uphill. So if we need some good news for Mineral, that would be it. And we can actually look at a video from Mineral. This is probably the first thing that I should have shown. But this is going to be the last hour with a camera situated fairly close to Mineral. And then we can see where that fire activity is. I believe that would be Mineral Summit right there. But again, kind of just trying to piece together all the different information that we have. I'm not seeing the spots over the ridge line. So I would say that's good news right there. What's the bad news though is that it does look very active at the moment. Although the smoke doesn't look to be going directly towards Mineral. It almost seems to be going off a bit more to the northeast. So one way to try to figure that out is to look at the smoke plume and the heat imagery. So yeah, it looks like that's like perfectly northeast right there. And then if we were to go back to this map where it shows where some of the heat has maybe escaped out of that firing operation, northeast would put it, let's put on the winds, that would put it potentially to the east of Mineral. However, that wouldn't exactly be good news, because if we turn on structures here, that's also where we have Mill Creek. But then, I mean, who's to say if it just kind of goes in between those two areas and then just starts to bump into the Dixie fire burn scar and slow down? I mean, hard to exactly say. But right now, the fact that they put it in that firing operation is crucial, because otherwise this would just be able to keep just ripping forward. You see all the fuel that we have there. But the fact that it's going to bump into where they cleared out some of those fuels is definitely going to slow down some of its growth. And I wonder if that's almost what's happening in this imagery right here, where earlier it is just exploding. You see those big pyrocumulus clouds. It's breaking through the inversion. Yesterday, we continued to see that kind of behavior through 6 p.m., even into 7 p.m. But now, although it's still very active, it looks like it's, I was going to say losing a bit of steam, but it might have just been one of those situations where it's kind of between pulses. So I want to reload this. Let's go last hour now. Yeah, what I was hoping to be able to say is that it's maybe bumped into the firing operation and then it's losing some steam because there aren't as many fuels to consume. But right there, it still has a giant pyrocumulus cloud. So yeah, where we started the live stream, where it looked like it was starting to calm down potentially, I would say that is no longer the case. It looks very active. We can look at it from another angle. This one is going to be Colby Mountain. This was kind of the camera to watch yesterday. Yeah, it looks like almost picked up in activity over the last maybe 30 minutes, which is probably about the time that I've been doing this live stream. So just coming back to watch duty. Right there, it says radio traffic indicates that the fire is making a hard run towards the Highway 172 Mineral Summit area with large spot fire noted just below that area. And then it says that it spots over Highway 172, but nothing major at this time. Additionally, we didn't read this part yet. Additionally, the fire is held up along 172 near the community of Mill Creek within the firing operation from last night, and 10 additional engines have been requested to that area. So what it's talking about right there is, I'm going to turn on just fire perimeter. The heat detections can get a little bit messy. Oh, this looks much clearer. So Mineral Summit, 172 goes along there. These orange clusters, let's also turn off winds. That's going to be Mill Creek. And based on what we're reading on watch duty right there, it sounds like I can't confirm this, but it sounds like they maybe were able to kind of connect those two. Because what that makes it sound like is that the fire has held up along 172 within the firing operation. And if we look there, hard to tell where 172 would be on this map. Maybe it's right there. Let's see if it has it on this graphic. Oh, you can see where 172 goes to Mill Creek. So I would say that's potentially more good news, that it sounds like it's still within that side of the firing operation. So amazing work that they did there. And then I guess the concern would be some of those spot fires that have jumped over 172, and then some of that heat that seems to be escaping on the left flank. But it seems like they are just absolutely swarming that side of the fire right there. Every time we look, there's at least 2 planes, 2 helicopters, and an air tanker dropping some retardant on that left side. Main reason they're doing that is because they do not want to have it make a run towards mineral. Now, how we know that it's not already through mineral, because when we look at this map, let's turn off fire history. This is a perfect example of why I always put a disclaimer on the satellite heat detections. That's what it looks like right now. Based on the satellite heat detections, you would think the fire is past mineral. And that's actually kind of similar to what it looked like yesterday. And then we woke up in the morning and the fire perimeter, where the fire had actually burned, was much to the south of where the heat detections had been the day before. So what's actually going on there when it looks like, based on this heat imagery, that the fire has gone all the way through Mineral and Mill Creek? I'm going to just turn that off just so we don't have any confusion here. What's happening is we have so much heat coming off of this fire and so much smoke coming off of this fire that the satellite, which gets that heat information, is picking up on some of the heat that's in the smoke plume. It's a little hard to tell from that imagery. That one's better for seeing where the fire is the most active and for seeing if the fire is calming down at all. Kind of goes along with what we're seeing on the cameras, that it actually seems to still be picking up in intensity. Look how bright orange that starts to go towards the end of that loop right there. Where you can see the clouds a bit more is on this one. So that's where you're going to see those pyrocumulus clouds with that bright white. But you can also just imagine how much heat is going to be in that smoke plume, which is why we can't always go off of those heat detections. And I don't even think I'm going to show those for the rest of this video, just because it can be so misleading. So as of right now, that's the information that we have to go off of for where the fire currently is. There's mineral, and then the reason that we know that those heat detections that I was showing, and then I said I wasn't going to show again, but I just did. The reason that we know that that's wrong and it hasn't gone through mineral is because we can actually look at the camera from mineral, and it looks like it hasn't gone over mineral summit yet. If that is mineral summit that we're looking at, which I believe it is based on all the other information that we've been able to kind of acquire here. It definitely looks like it's getting close, though. It looks like it's maybe right along the ridge line, which would be right where that firing operation is. Right along there. So, yeah, this is a pretty critical time in the fire at the moment. Let's just replay this. This is the last hour, and you might even be able to start to see it come over that ridge towards the very end of this loop. You see some of those flames right in there. Again, what I will say though is it doesn't actually look like it's going straight towards this camera. And if we want to see where this camera is, we can zoom in here. It actually looks to be on the, here's mineral. This camera looks to be just to the east of mineral. So a lot of that smoke in that camera view looks to be going to the northeast of the camera. So that would mean that if the smoke is going towards the northeast of the camera, that would mean that mineral, that the fire wouldn't be going directly towards mineral. That's at least kind of what I'm hoping here. And it does look like the smoke is going very northeast based on that imagery right there. I would almost be more worried right now if that, for mineral, if that smoke was going directly north. The reason I say that is because where we are seeing some potential heat detections is outside of that firing operation on the west, where they're just blasting it with air attack right now. And if there was a straight southerly wind, I might have accidentally said northerly earlier, but a southerly wind would be pushing those heat detections straight towards mineral. But it does look like it's a lot more southwest. And looking at the wind plots, that does seem to be the case. So that's why when we look at the camera angle, that smoke seems to be going off towards, like, mineral would maybe be down kind of around this area. Now, with all that being said, that is much closer than I would like to see that large of a plume with this much activity going on right now. And then just piecing together some more kind of information here. If you're just joining, might wonder kind of why are we seeing so much activity this afternoon? It's a combination of things. One reason is similar to what happened yesterday. Is what I was hoping was the winds were going to calm down overnight, and then the smoke was going to settle over the fire, and then it was going to block out some of the solar radiation as it comes in. But if we actually look at what the solar radiation did throughout the day today, it was potentially even higher than it was yesterday. So that was August 2nd, August 3rd, when the fire was covered in smoke, so we didn't have as much sunlight coming through, we didn't heat up as much, and we had very minimal activity. And then yesterday we started off with clear skies. You can see how much solar radiation we picked up. Today we had clear skies. You can see how much solar radiation we picked up. So solar radiation, kind of a sciencey term right there, but what that actually means for us is that our temperatures went way up, or not went way up, but compared to August 3rd, they're way up. August 3rd, when we were covered in smoke, it was only around 82. And then you could see that steady increase in temperatures ever since. And then that's showing some mid-90s. Then you might think, okay, why is temperature important on a fire? One, it helps pull moisture out of fuels, which allows the fire to go a lot faster. And then two, the hotter the air is, the lower your relative humidity is going to be. So around August 3rd, when there was smoke shading, not much solar radiation, and kind of cooler, relatively cool temperatures, you could see how high our relative humidity was. And then we also had that monsoonal moisture moving in, leading to some cloud cover, even a little bit of rainfall as well, which helped us over the weekend and helped them prepare for this. And we'll get into those preparations more in just a second. But since we've been heating up, you can see what's happening to our relative humidity. It keeps going down until today, it's in the low teens to potentially even some single digits. And one problem with the relative humidity overnight tonight is it's not going to be going up all that much. This is the same thing that happened last night. What we would like to see on this chart, so this black column right there, that's our temperatures tonight, our winds tonight, and our relative humidity tonight. We'll say the good news first. Good news is it does look like we're going to be a little bit cooler tonight. I believe some spots last night they stayed in the 70s overnight. Other good news, our winds, what winds we do have are going to be calming down and then actually coming from the northeast, which would try to make this fire kind of push back in on itself. So that northeasterly wind tonight could be very favorable for firefighters, for potentially doing some more firing operations, and really just calming this fire down, because instead of chewing up more fuel that's going to stay exceptionally dry overnight, it'll actually just kind of push the fire back in on itself. So that's where the good news is. We're cooling down overnight. Calmer winds in a good direction overnight, which would try to take the fire again and just push it back into itself, because those winds would be coming from the northeast. Where the bad news comes in is that we're not going to have good moisture recovery. So instead of getting a lot of moisture in our fuels because our relative humidity goes up to 70%, it's going to be staying about as dry as you would sometimes see in the afternoon hours. And it might not even matter that much that we don't have much wind, because this isn't really a wind-driven fire right now. Even though the winds kind of help determine the direction of spread and maybe the direction that some embers are going to be cast to create some spot fires, the main thing driving this fire right now is how dry it is and how much fuel we have. I mean, you can see how much fuel we have from this video from Mineral. You can't see how dry it is, but I mean, we looked at the weather stations and some of them had relative humidity in the teens at 5 a.m. this morning, which is exceptionally dry. So it does look like this side of the fire continues to make a push towards Mineral. I will say, though, it does still look like we have some distance there. So let's just say, let's update watch duty here, make sure there hasn't been anything new that I'm missing. Okay, I last updated an hour ago, so nothing new there. But I just want to kind of measure it out. So it says radio traffic indicates the fire has spotted across Highway 172 in a couple spots near Mineral Summit, but nothing major at this time. So if we assume that the worst that has happened at this point is that we've gotten some spots across 172, and this firing operation, as we know, is right along 172. So let's just assume that some of those spots were able to jump over the firing operation to the other side of 172, like that sentence would make us believe. Now let's measure how far that would be to Mineral. So distance, that's going to be about 1.66 miles. So that's still a pretty good distance for us, especially when you consider the fact that we have over 6,000 personnel on this fire, over 500 engines. There's air attack all over this side of the fire, just constantly. That's maybe the new record I've seen for the most air attack on a fire. And then on top of that, they took advantage of some of the very favorable conditions that we had when the weather was cooler with a lot more moisture, and they just littered this area with dozer lines. So right there is Mill Creek. It's kind of hard to see where Mineral is on this image right here, but anywhere where you see those black X's, that's going to be where they put in dozer lines. So it's not only the air attack that's helping us, it's not only the over 6,000 personnel that have gone into some of these communities and already been preparing some of the structures, but they've also been putting in, and then it's not only this firing operation, but it's also all these dozer lines that we see just crisscrossing all over the place between Mill Creek, between Mineral, and where the fire is. So that's all, I would say, encouraging information there. What is maybe just the discouraging thing is just how active this fire still looks. If we look at the last hour, still seeing it doing that pulsing thing where you see those pyrocumulus clouds. And I mean, based on the last time we looked at this imagery, still a lot of smoke coming off it. If the smoke's going towards the northeast, that means the fire is going to be trying to go towards the northeast. One thing I will say though is, since it's fuel and humidity driven, or a lack of humidity driven, I think I would rather have that than a wind driven fire. Because, I mean, we saw what happens when you have a wind driven fire on the first week of this fire, where it was going 10 to 15 miles in a single day, where it just, in about 3 to 4 days, it went from Chico almost all the way up to Manton, or at least in Skip Hill. It definitely still looks like it's moving very quickly right now, but maybe not as quickly as if we still had those 30-mile-per-hour winds that we had at the first week of the fire. What I wanted to point out here, though, is that what we would like to see is less orange on this graphic, meaning the fire would be calming down. But unfortunately, it actually looks like we have more orange, meaning the fire is actually picking up in intensity. And the only kind of explanation I could have for that, I closed my weather observations earlier, so I'm just going to have to open it back up. Only explanation I can have for that, since it's not that windy, coming in here, there's Mineral, there's Mill Creek. Our winds are still only showing about 4 to 7 miles per hour. Let's see what the max wind speed was around Mill Creek today. 7 miles per hour. So almost no wind. Underneath the plume, we stayed cooler. But that relative humidity right there, that is half the problem. 13% min relative humidity. The other half of the problem is that when we look at fire history, there is no fire history in this area. So when you have this much fuel and your relative humidity drops into the teens and single digits, and especially when you didn't have a good recovery overnight, that's where you're going to have a very active day like what we're seeing. What works in our favor, though, the fact that it's not exceptionally windy, is that decreases the fire's ability to create spot fires, because stronger winds would be able to pick up more burning embers and toss them a greater distance. With that being said, when you see a smoke plume like this, that's where the fire starts to actually create its own weather, because you could think about what's happening. You have a lot of rising motion right there, and then you can't just have a vacuum at the surface. So air is going to start rushing in to fill the place of the air that's rising, and then you have basically the wildfire creating its own weather. And that's where a lot of the winds are on this fire, or the winds that are impacting the fire today are most likely the winds that the fire is actually creating itself. The other thing that can happen in terms of winds is where we've seen a lot of this growth on this fire. So the red is going to be where the growth was yesterday, right there. You can see how it established down in Mill Creek drainage. We did have that spot fire. And then with the dry fuels, with the dry conditions, with the southwesterly wind we had yesterday, we'll say wind did seem to be stronger yesterday. This one shows wind gusts. Maybe part of the reason yesterday we had so much more growth is instead of 12 mile per hour wind gusts, we did have some 15 mile per hour wind gusts. Again, I'd say it's more because of humidity and fuel. But today, not as windy as yesterday. Max gust only around 11 miles per hour. If we come back here though, one thing to note is Mill Creek drainage in there, because that's going to kind of funnel the winds and also push the fire within that drainage. What's going to happen on this section though, I believe they call that Big Bend, is since your winds like to go kind of up the canyon in the afternoon hours, that's going to create a little bit of rotation right here. So what that can do to your smoke plume is start to lead to some rotation on the smoke plume, and then that can lead to winds coming in all sorts of different directions. Maybe it's coming from that direction on that side and then that direction on that side. And that's where it can be a very dangerous situation for firefighters, because the fire becomes less predictable because your winds are more erratic. So that's just something I'm thinking about as it moves up Mill Creek drainage right there. But coming in here, this gives us kind of a better view of where the fire is right now. So we have Mill Creek over to the right. We have Mineral up towards north. And then there's 172. That's where they've done the firing operation. And it looks like that is where the fire is as of right now. So it is moved up Mill Creek drainage, and it appears that it's pretty close to that firing operation and even starting to spot over it a little bit. And the reason I say that is because of the update that we read on Watch Duty where they said it's over 172. And remember, this fire perimeter is not our most recent perimeter. Most recent one can be found right here, where they were able to really do some great burning last night. They took advantage of the calmer winds, and sometimes that can actually be good where it stays dry enough overnight that you can actually do a firing operation. If you have too much moisture move in, then you actually can't maybe burn out some of the fuels. What I'd like to know is if they connected those two spots right there. But the last update that we heard of sounds like it has remained within the firing operation. So all of the information we've been able to acquire so far, in the area around Mill Creek that we're very concerned about, it sounds like it stayed within the firing operation. In the area around Mineral that we're worried about, it does sound like we've had some spots over the firing operation, which is right along 172, but it doesn't. At the last update we read, they said that it's nothing big there yet. And if we actually look from Mineral, I mean, I'm not seeing where those spots are, unless that's maybe one of the spots that has crossed 172. But that seems like it would be a big deal if that was one of the spots, because that looks like a pretty good big smoke plume. That seems to be the front itself. Although again, I'm only as good as the information that I can find on these pages. So what have we figured out? I think I'm going to update Watch Duty one more time. I'm going to also open up the live chat, see if anybody has put in any questions. Yeah, somebody mentioned no moisture in the fuels, especially not with how dry it stayed overnight. And yeah, I think we've kind of figured out all the best information that we can on the fire at this point. Basically, what I would say is the most recent information we have, it sounds like it is very active right now. It doesn't sound like it. We've actually seen evidence of how active it is right now. But the last we've heard, it is staying within firing operation around Mill Creek. And we've actually looked at it from Mineral. We know that it's not to Mineral yet because this camera is just to the east of Mineral looking back at the fire. Definitely closer than I would like to see it though. We have a lot of fuel in there and it is going to be remaining dry overnight. So we may continue to see some activity overnight tonight. What is also concerning is the forecast for tomorrow. I hadn't really talked about this yet, but tomorrow is going to be very similar to today in terms of the fact that we're going to be starting off the day dry, dropping into the teens to potentially single digits in relative humidity. Temperature is going up to the mid to high 90s. Winds still don't look to be a huge factor tomorrow, but again, this fire seems to be mostly driven by fuel and dry air at this point. So I think that's the best information that we have to go off of right now. I gotta save my voice somewhat for tomorrow, but I'll definitely have another update as soon as I can tomorrow morning. Hopefully this one has been helpful, and thanks for watching.